everyone, welcome back to the channel. Firstly, I want to address any confusion with not uploading last week. I went back to school, things were getting really hectic, and I was prepping for the video that you'll get to hear very shortly. You will realize that this week's format is a bit different from a typical animation and explanation by talking to the camera. I was going for more of a podcast vibe with this week's episode. I want to introduce this video by sharing that one of the reasons I really got into linguistics and especially linguistic anthropology as a high schooler was through learning more at a community college course I took earlier this year. And recently, I had the wonderful opportunity of inviting my professor, Dr. Das, to this channel to have a discussion about what linguistic anthropology even means. And specifically, we delve into how we apply the topics of linguistic anthropology to other fields, and how we can use language to examine how social groups have changed over the years. So I hope you guys will enjoy this episode, and like always, I'll read every comment and suggestion down below. Enjoy the show. First off, thank you so much for being willing to do this with me, to be able to go back on some of the topics I've learned. It's been really nice. So I kind of wanted to invite you onto my channel to just see what your opinions on about some of the aspects of linguistic anthropology and kind of your work, and if you have any advice or message to people who might be interested in this. So my first question is, how would you define linguistic anthropology to someone who's maybe never heard of it? How does it fall under this branch of anthropology?
So, anthropology is the study of different cultures and how those cultures make us what we are. And I think the way anthropologists look at culture is definitely a tool for all of us human beings to survive, because it helps us to adapt to our environment, whether it's our natural environment or whether it's our social environment, whatever sort of environment that we are talking about, or even linguistic environment in this situation. Culture really helps us as human beings to adapt to our environment, and it's sort of a tool that's passed on from those who have been in that culture from before to those who are coming into it as new entrants into the culture. So whether it could be people who are young, who are like the next generation, or it could also be people who are just sort of coming in as newcomers, like as immigrants. Sometimes we come into cultures that we are not familiar with, and we might have undergone a process of enculturation in our original culture, but then we sometimes go through this process of unlearning some of what we learned before, and then relearning it, and that would be acculturation. So that does happen to a lot of us, and I think that linguistic anthropology is sort of teaching us what the link is between language and culture, between language and society. And definitely it's true that the language that we learn helps us to form a lens through which we can understand the world around us and our place in it, to categorize the world we see around us in accordance with the language we have learned, and to interact with it also in accordance with the language we have learned. So the link between language and culture is inextricable. Language is like a window into the culture of a people. So definitely, I think that linguistic anthropology is a really interesting topic, because it touches upon not just language but also culture, and not just culture but also language. So the word in the world and the word in the word. So that's what I'm interested in, and it's always fascinated me. So I'm so happy that we could discuss it this evening. Thank you, Anika.
So shifting the gears a little bit to about you. So I'm really curious how you got interested in linguistic anthropology, because for me, I feel like it's a bit of a niche subject, right? And then really what led you to become a professor of linguistic anthropology?
So for me, actually, I was always interested in immigrant studies, actually. My PhD dissertation is also about how Asian women, actually Indian American women, how they have, made a world for themselves across, tens of thousands of miles from their home country here in the Bay Area. And the sort of cultural accommodation or adjustment or cultural, you can call it cultural gymnastics that they undergo as they want to be counted um, as workers who are like serious in with as far as their work is concerned in the workplace. But they also want to continue their Indian culture here in America as much as is possible, especially as in different forms. Maybe they are performing artists, or maybe they are parents, they are mothers of children. They want to pass on a little bit of their culture as much as is possible or practical to their children as they are raising them here in the United States. There are various different reasons, why why the women I spoke to wanted to hold on to the culture that they were familiar with as they were growing up in India at home, especially in private spaces at home. And of course, nostalgia is definitely one of the most important reasons why they wanted to do this. So I felt that the women were, sort of making a journey between two different versions of the self. So this is what I wanted to study. So I kind of, interviewed 60 women for my PhD dissertation. And, I asked them questions about these topics, and they shared their lives with me very generously. And, their feelings and their experiences. So I'm very grateful for that. One thing that really struck me was how language was so important in this whole process. So these were, professional working women, and they worked in spheres like they were like, in the IT industry, or they were in academia, or they were, doctors or dentists or teachers in elementary school, preschool, various different professions, but all, white collar professions. And so therefore they had to, speak, they had to communicate with people at the workplace. And these were women mostly who had, in India, we have had 200 years of colonial rule by the British, the British Raj, so to speak. So middle class Indians usually try to send their children to English medium schools. So these were women who had been educated in the English language, albeit the British, sort of, version of it. So they had grown up reading Shakespeare and Dickens, or Jane Austen, and they were in their mind they were quite good at communicating in the English language. But when they came to America, many of them found that here it was a different ball game, so to speak, because not only was the culture, of course, different, but the accent also, the way English was spoken here was quite different. So they had to relearn a lot of, the way they spoke English, the way they communicated in English. And as I said, they wanted to sort of be accepted as contributing, workers in the workplace. So they made an effort, to sort of learn to speak in a way that people would be able to listen to them here in the workplace, at their workplace, without being distracted by their accent or their, unusual vocabulary, whatever it was. They made that effort. And yet at home, of course, as I said before, they were sort of, trying to hold on to their the native language that they had learned, their mother tongue, so to speak, that they had learned at home, not in their school, not in their college, not in their workplace, even within India. There was this dichotomy of English being spoken in public spheres, like in school or college. But at home, they spoke their mother tongue, so to speak. So they continued this dichotomy, even here in the US. So I felt that, as they were speaking these two different languages, they were almost in some ways two separate people. And I think, this is not so unusual an experience. If we talk about code switching, for example. So people, like to present themselves in different ways, in different, they like to present different aspects of their personality in different settings and among different groups of individuals. And they might, switch from one language to the other. They might switch from one accent to the other. They might switch from, from standard English to a different dialect of English. So a lot of people do that in America. I think Indian Americans are not unusual in that way, but they definitely did it. And as I observed it, I was very intrigued that how is language so important in making up our persona, in how we present ourselves to other people. So therefore, I really wanted to delve further into it. And then there was another reason, and that is I really like to read translations, especially of Indian poets. And I am always intrigued by, is it really possible to translate? Can the translation actually present the full beauty of the original, given that not only is the language different, but also the cultural cues, the whole cultural environment, everything is going to be difficult to translate from one language to the other. A lot could be lost in translation. So this was something also that really always intrigued me. So that was another reason why I got, kind of drawn into linguistic anthropology. And for me, there are many Indian poets whose work I always, like to follow in the Indian national language, which is Hindi, and they wrote in different dialects of Hindi in the medieval times. And people have been trying to translate their work in English. Many different translations exist for Indian medieval poets like Mirabai or Kabir, and it's interesting how these different versions, different translations of the same poem sort of kind of maybe sort of focus on different aspects of these really immortal works of verse that I have always loved. So that's another reason why I've been very interested in linguistic anthropology.
I see. Wow. Yeah. I also think that's really interesting, right? Because you have some really famous books that have been translated to 70 different languages, but you also wonder how much of it is it really possible? Do people really get the full scope of it? So yeah, it's a very
because
interesting.
it's hard, it's hard to translate not just the meaning of the words, but you also have to translate the context.
Yeah.
And that is so hard.
Yeah. I think in some cases it might not even be possible with just right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you could write a long footnote, but that's just it's not going to work. You can't really translate every nuance of many of these works as they are in the original.
Yeah. So. I was wondering, we saw this connection through your study of linguistic anthropology and workplace. So what are some other careers or other things that we can learn from linguistic anthropology that we can apply to other fields?
I think it's something that I've not really entered in any great detail, but right now we are kind of undergoing a sort of a revolution as far as AI is concerned. And definitely, people who are trying to make AI understand, the data that is being presented to it as a human being would understand it, and also interact with humans the way, regular human beings would interact with each other. And language is a very important aspect of it. So how the human brain processes language and understands what is being communicated to it, that is what, AI scientists are trying to replicate for AI. So anybody, who is sort of familiar with sort of, I don't know, information technology, the science of AI, and also familiar with linguistics and also culture, how human beings are using language to understand and interact and communicate with each other. For that sort of a person who has expertise in all these three different fields, for them, this would definitely be a time to really benefit and also help the whole AI and language industry. So that's a very important, I think, aspect of, of linguistic anthropology being applied in a real life job right now. And of course, there are other things too. I think translation is definitely one of the things that is important because we want to explain, as we were saying, not just the meaning of the words, but also the context. So there too. And of course, there's also one more aspect, and that is that a lot of, as there were originally 7,000 languages, but now it's dwindling. The number of languages that are actually spoken are dwindling to almost 1/7 of the original number of languages spoken all over the world, and there are only a few languages that are becoming more and more popular, and everybody is speaking those languages and forgetting their very often these are indigenous groups that are very tiny, that are very isolated, remote, and they're located in remote parts of the world, and as they join the mainstream of the mainstream economy of their nation, very often they sort of leave their indigenous homelands and they move to the cities to work. Sometimes the mainstream culture of that place, it enters the indigenous homeland in the form of schooling or education or new employment opportunities in that place. So various reasons why people who speak indigenous languages, particularly indigenous languages, and as anthropologists, we're extremely, interested in indigenous communities. So particularly indigenous languages are being lost because of the mainstream sort of influences, mainstream linguistic influences coming in to sort of kind of wipe out these indigenous languages that are spoken by very tiny minorities. So I think linguistic anthropologists could help efforts to revive these languages, revitalize these languages, and present some sort of a means by which the languages can be preserved and they can be popularized among people who want to sort of speak these languages again. So I think these are different types of real life applications of linguistic anthropology. These are just a few of the ones that occurred to me right now, but I'm sure there are many more. So yeah, what do you think, Anika?
Yeah, I always wonder, like, when the world becomes so like interconnected, like that's such a good thing, right? But at the same time, there's kind of these sacrifices that are made, and I feel like people these days are using less diverse set of like words, like our words. Like if you looked at what I've said, I feel like many of them would be like the same words over and over again, and it just seems really interesting, like culture and language, but also technology and language.
Absolutely. Technology, especially, for the young people, I think that's really fascinating because when we were young, we used to talk a lot. We would just, pick up the phone and chat with our friends. But I'm not sure that people do that much anymore. It's more all about texting.
Yeah.
Or using, I don't know, emojis, different ways of communication, which in our generation were not that common. So I think the use of the effect of technology on language is also something that a lot of people have been discussing, and that too we should take into consideration. And of course, mainstreaming, because of mainstream influences, people tend to use the same sort of vocabulary. And the Americanization, I think American culture has become so popular all over the world, that in our time, especially since we were sort of a kind of an ex colony of the British, we were more keen on using so-called British English. But if you go to ex colonies of Britain today, the Americanization of the English language really strikes you. And people are using Americanisms. They're using American spelling, and it's kind of like sort of even the way that the English language is used, it's in flux, because there are the remnants of British language or British English, and yet at the same time, because of various influences, it could be because of new English texts that they are reading in school or college, could be because of American multinational corporations having developing such a large footprint, or becoming more popular, opening branches in ex-British colonies such as India. It could be because of the popularity of Hollywood movies or American TV shows. There are various different reasons, or even, of course, American pop music. But definitely, American English is becoming more and more popular in ex-British colonies such as India. So yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating if you think about that, if you look at that, and yeah, it's definitely the homogeneity of English language all across the globe is striking. And within our own lifetimes, we've seen this happen, and it's increasing, day by day. So yeah, that's definitely a very important, a very interesting topic. So yeah, thank you, Anika.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that my dad's from Singapore, which is also an ex-colony of Britain. So I definitely know what you're talking about. But I remember like when my dad used to like get me those workbooks, and then they had like these word problems. I wouldn't understand what they were saying sometimes, because they'll be like, "Oh, the pupil," which is how they call like a student, right? Like the pupil, and I was like the eye, like yeah. I was like very confused. But I definitely do agree that like this whole like Americanization, especially like politically, economically, it seems to fall in line, and you see it reflected in language too. So
in language too, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that you're absolutely right. So you know exactly what I'm talking
yes,
about.
yes,
Because you're familiar with Singaporean English, which is of course, British English.
yeah.
So absolutely. Yeah.
And then I think maybe one way that we can wrap up this conversation is like, do you have a specific favorite topic about linguistic anthropology? One we covered in class or not, or one topic lesson that you think every student can benefit from or can learn something from?
So for me, right now, definitely, it would be, translation, because this is what I'm into right now. But I think if you talk to me, like maybe next month, I'll have some different. But for me right now, I'm really, trying to read these poems and in the original, because, for me, I was in English medium school, but our second language was Hindi. And we actually read these poems in school. And as I said, we were not familiar. It's like, if you're English speaker and you read medieval English poems, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different from the way we spoke, Hindi in our day-to-day life. But it was very beautiful. So that's what I'm, really interested in right now, and how to sort of translate. I'm trying to translate them myself, and provide my own little version of what these medieval Indian poets, what they were writing about. I think it's really important. For me, it seems important because at that time, as you know, India was going through a lot of upheaval, because there was the traditional culture. Traditionally India has been various different religions have been popular in India, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. But at that time, a lot of Islamic influences were coming in, and the rulers were Islamic, and yet at the same time there were different parts of India where there were sort of kind of rebellions against these rulers. And it was not really about religion. It was just about who was in charge, who was in power, who had the authority, who was the ruler. So we have also within Hinduism, also we have different sects. We have Vaishnavas who worship Krishna. We have those who are, Shakti worshippers, they worship female power, goddesses such as Durga. So there were those there were those issues within the Hindu religious communities. There was also sort of kind of people who were, one of the writers is Meera. So she was a worshipper of Krishna, and Krishna, of course, is a very popular god in India today. But we also have writers like Kabir, and Kabir was, he was born in Islamic household, but he became the pupil of a Hindu philosopher. So he was trying to, get sort of draw from the philosophy of both these religions. So it is, I think that, we also have Guru Nanak, for example, who started a completely new religion. I don't think it's a religious sect, it's a religion called Sikhism, in India. So there were these various different philosophical influences, and how these medieval poets, drew upon these different, philosophical debates, and they presented their own version. So I think it's really interesting, because we live in a world right now which is also, we have so many different philosophical influences upon our own minds. And I really like to study how these poets tried to weave it all together and form sort of a poem, a narrative of great beauty, which provides a lot of joy to me. So I'm trying to translate that and pass it on to those people who are not familiar with the Hindi language. So yeah, that's my latest interest. So that's why I wanted to share it. Thank you so much, Annika.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for this. Learned so much, had a very nice discussion. And yeah, I really just feel like language is just such a timeless thing that we can, always study, because it keeps evolving, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. And especially the Bay Area, I think, definitely has its own lingo. Would you say that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially when I talk to other people from different areas, they'll be like, "Oh, you have an accent," and I'm like, "Oh, interesting." Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've been traveling across America, and it's true, different parts of America, just the way they speak English, it sounds a little bit different. So that too is something very fascinating, especially for me as an immigrant. So anyway, thank you so much, Annika.
Yes. Thank you so much, Professor Das, for this. So.
Thank you for having me. Okay. Take care then. Bye.
Okay, bye.